we have the ability to get a lot better. Ego is this sort of impediment to improvement because it doesn't believe that it needs to improve. Ralph Waldo Emerson, every man I meet is my master in some point, and in that I learn from him. I've talked to coaches and teams all over the world, and what I think is always interesting is that the head coach usually sits in the front row just like this. Not because there's usually very little I can teach that person. He probably knows more about this than I do. But he's in the front row taking notes, not just because he wants to set a good example, but there is maybe a 1% chance that there is something that I could pass along. So what greats have is not a sense that they know everything, but actually a hunger, an awareness of what they don't know, and an eagerness to go find that from any and every source. Socrates is considered the wisest man in the world. What's his secret? He was aware of his own ignorance. He was aware of what he didn't know. And so again, this is what we want to cultivate in ourselves. So I don't like this idea of faking it till you make it. I think that another word for that is lying or fraud. I like doing the work. I'm going to make it happen with my own work, with my own effort. Bill Bradley, when you are not practicing, remember someone somewhere is practicing, and when you meet that person, they will beat you, right? Ego thinks that it already is the best. Humility says, I'm going to work until I am the best. And this is a great line. He says, just that you do the right thing, the rest doesn't matter, right? Whatever the conditions, whether you're tired, whether people are looking, whether they aren't looking, whether you're going to be criticized for it, what matters is that you do the right thing. Doesn't matter what ego is telling you. What matters is it the right thing? And then there's this moment where after Marcus becomes emperor, the empire is very heavily in debt. And there's a lot of things an emperor can do in this situation, right? He could levy taxes on the poor. He could invade another country, could print more money. He could do things that would basically hurt everyone but him. And that's actually not what Marcus does. The first thing he does is he walks through the imperial palace, all his possessions, and he begins pointing at all the most valuable possessions that the emperor owns. And he asks his men to sell them. So he starts selling off the palace furnishings to pay down the debt. He says, why should the Roman people suffer if I'm not going to feel the pain first? And I think that's what a leader does. They do the right thing even when it costs them. And in fact, they're willing to take the hit first before anyone else. And he has this great line in Meditations. He says, let's waste no more time arguing what a good man is like. Let's just be one, right? And that's what we have to do, particularly in our moments of greatest success, because that's when it reflects most on us. Now, here's where ego is really toxic, right? Because if your ego was there on the way up, whispering in your ear that you're special, that you're better than everyone else, that you winning a lot says that you're a great human being, or that having a lot of money makes you the best person around. Well, now what happens if those things are taken away, right? If what you love is what people are saying about you on Twitter, do you actually love that they're saying things about you on Twitter, or do you love how nice they're being? Well, then how do you handle it when all of a sudden they turn on you, right? And so if ego is there taking a lot of this into being our identity, we're really fucked when things aren't going well. And so this is Ben Horowitz. He's one of the most successful investors of all time. Airbnb, Dropbox, Uber, billions of dollars in investments. He says, the hard thing isn't setting a big goal. The hard thing is what you do when you start to fail, when you start to experience difficulty, when the dream turns into a nightmare. And that is going to happen in life. We are going to have setbacks. We're going to get hurt. We're going to get benched. We're going to get criticized. We're going to drop a pass, right? Things are going to happen. And then, how do we respond? This is really where we prove who we are. These are going to be moments where we're not in control, where we have what you might call dead time. As an example, this is a guy named Malcolm Little. He was basically a low-level criminal in Harlem. And he ends up getting caught. He goes to jail, sentenced to 10 years in a penitentiary. He spends the first basically year of that sentence being very angry about the fact that he's in jail and not liking it, of course. But But then he asks himself, well, what am I going to do with this time, right? He could become a better criminal in jail. He could sit there and watch the seconds of his life tick away, or he could use this time. So he goes to the prison library and the commissary, he buys a notebook and he checks out a dictionary and he begins to transfer word by word the dictionary. Basically teaches himself to read this way, teaches himself a vocabulary this way, and then he starts reading everything he can get his hands on. He reads history, he reads philosophy, he reads religion, and it's in this process that Malcolm Little is transformed into Malcolm X. He would say, from then until I left that prison, in every free moment I had, if I was not reading in my library, I was reading in my bunk. He becomes Malcolm X. Why does Malcolm X wear glasses? It's because he actually wears out his eyes reading in the dim light of prison. People would ask him where he went to college because he was so smart, and he said, books. That's where he went to college. He just read. He transformed himself. He took dead time that he was not in control, and he turned it into what we would call alive time, right? He made use of every possible second. And so one of the thoughts I would leave you guys with is ego says this is unfair, I hate this, I don't want this, I just have to wait this out. Confidence, humility says, okay, what can I accept about this situation that will allow me to move forward? Instead of spending 1 second complaining about the hit that blew out my knee, or the fact that I got chosen or someone got chosen over me, what I'm going to focus on is how I can use this position that I'm now in to move forward, to get better in some way. How can I turn this into a good thing that happened to me? They've done some interesting studies on elite athletes where actually after an injury, they come back and they're better in some way. And the academic term for this is post-traumatic growth. And so the idea being that the athlete is injured, yes, and it would be better if they weren't injured, right? If they never had a weak knee or they didn't blow out their elbow or whatever it was. But maybe they spend that time becoming a better teammate or reevaluating why they're playing the game in the first place.